Hey, folks, and welcome to another episode of Yes and Ask Me, a show based out of Bear Stage here in San Antonio, Texas, where I get to interview some of the most senior level players and most awesome players of this improv community. Today's show is integrating the audience. That's integrating and incorporating the audience into your improv show. And let me go ahead and introduce my panel. My first guest is my middle square, Tina Jackson. Please join us.
There, ready.
Thank you so much, Tina. I
How
know
you
you
doing,
so
Rick?
well. All of our viewers are knowing you so well now. I just want to say you got 20 years of improv under your belt,
hmm
and you are also the owner and operator of Bear Stage here in San Antonio.
That's it. Those are the two highlights.
Yeah, so essentially you're a total badass, is what we're.
Oh, yes. That's the third point, obviously.
That's the third point. Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, excellent. Thank you for joining us.
Always.
My next guest is Heidi Rogers. Heidi, would you please join us?
Hello.
Heidi, thank you so much for being on the show. This is your first time on Yes and Ask Me.
Yes.
Can you give us a little bit of background? How long have you been doing improv, and where are you based out of?
Yeah, so I'm based out of Austin, Texas. I've been doing improv 8.5 years. God, that's a long time. I started off, if you know Austin Improv at all, I started off taking classes at the Hideout Theater and then moved to the Institution Theater and was there for many, many years. And now I just kind of, all over the place. Fallout, Cold Town, pretty much all of them. And then my duo partner and I, Kenny Madison, we're Kenny Rogers, and we come down to Bear, I'd say like every other month or so to do a show. And we literally, our last show before the coronavirus hit was at Bear for the
Was it really?
Profit.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
It was a great
forever
show.
ago, but it
wasn't. It was February. So
Is that the Cats show?
No, that was a great show though. That was the other big little.
That was a Big Little.
Big Little Lies one in August. So
Yeah.
That was also a good one.
Lex Simpson, would you show your face, please?
Hi. Thanks
Hey,
for having
Lex.
me back, Rick.
Lex, this is your third time on my damn show, man.
I'm going for that official guest star rating. That's what I want.
He wants the jacket at
Those dividends.
5.
The SNL.
I was like, he and Clint are going for the jacket.
Lex, for those viewers who didn't see the other shows that you jumped in on, can you give us some background on your experience in improv?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I've been playing for about 8 years, so I'm a precious baby compared to Heidi. I did most of my training up in Austin, and in fact, fun fact, Heidi and I had a level 4 at the institution together.
I know, it's crazy.
50 years ago, something to that.
Yes,
Yeah.
something.
And,
Yes, started improv 8 years ago. 50 years ago, you were in an improv class.
Time is not a flat circle.
I'm
In
looking
You are
at
old,
the
but you look
timeline
great
and
for your
calling you on your shit, Lex.
Time is not a flat circle or a straight line. It is a ball of yarn of just intertwining nonsense. Anyway, I've been playing for 8 years or so. I've been artistic director. I played a lot of short form with Comedy Sports San Antonio. I teach over at Bear. I'm currently the only team I got right now. I think I'm playing, let's see, team group, or what was the argument earlier? I want to start the fire.
Oh God, I don't want to do it.
Please.
Troop versus team.
It's a team because we're in San
Austin,
Antonio.
they call them troops in Austin.
My true
Good
team
God.
teams.
is Shakespeare show with Tina is Lovers and
Lovers and
Mad.
Madmen.
Got the darn name.
Lex, thank you for joining the show. This is gonna be
Nightmare.
fun.
You already can tell it's a nightmare.
Something, Rick.
The three of us, terrible.
Night nephew, feel for nightmares. What?
Okay, Tina, why don't you just start us off? Okay, so today's show is about integrating the audience, about audience participation, led by the improvisers that are on stage. What does this look like, and why is it even important? Why are we even discussing this?
Sure. I mean, so one thing that we get a lot, I think once you have done a bunch of shows and are feeling pretty strong in your performance and stuff, is that people after shows will start commenting to you like, that's rehearsed, right? Like that was scripted somehow, or like if you're really doing a great job on stage, sometimes improv looks scripted. And it's not, we're always improvising on stage. And one of the ways that we prove that to the audience is by incorporating their ideas into the show so that they feel that live audience experience, that one of a kind sort of treatment. And so in general, I've seen improv that doesn't, but in general, we ask for a suggestion from our audience to get started on something to help the audience, A, feel involved, and B, understand that what we're doing is completely made up on the spot. We couldn't have guessed what was going to come out of your mouth as a suggestion. Dildo. It's dildo. But we will do the show based on your suggestion. You will see your show, like, incorporate your suggestion.
Penis! Sorry, what?
Incorporated into the show. Oh my god, ADD is so hard.
Penis isn't as fun as dildo.
I was so distracted by the dick that just got yelled about.
I'm just being an audience member.
I know, it's true.
I
So
was
good or
doing
bad, the
things.
audience is part of the show. Part of the live audience experience is the live audience. And so utilizing the audience can be like a really cool tool to use in or outside of just asking for the suggestion. So asking for the suggestion, I think, is like what I consider bare minimum. But then there's so many ways beyond that to involve the audience in your show. And I think one of the reasons we asked Heidi on the show is like Kenny Rogers is a team that really incorporates so much of the audience in their show. And so
For better or worse in sickness.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
definitely for the better. So Heidi, I
Yeah.
watched your show, Kenny Rogers, several different times. You guys love breaking the fourth wall. You break the fourth wall all the time, several times during your show, and you go back to the audience and back to the audience.
What?
You can't
What?
it's never there.
Yeah, it was never there. It's just 3 walls. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Heidi, did you always do that? Is that something that you started off doing in improv? Or did you just sort of like learn that move later on as you evolved in your improv career?
Yeah, I would say that meta improv, or things where it's almost like you're commenting on the improv you're doing, is highly frowned upon in the improv community in general. It's because it's not done very well. Although I would argue that if anybody has seen Middleditch and Schwartz's shows on Netflix recently, which I highly recommend if you haven't, they're extremely meta and they do it so well and in such a fun way. And so that's a side note altogether. But I didn't start off doing that. I probably say I did it some, like in student showcases and stuff, where like I hadn't figured out that's not really what a lot of people want, is like haha funny side jokes, because the audience isn't in on the joke. The audience needs to be in on the joke. And Kenny Rogers, when we started playing together 4-ish years ago, it was literally just like on a lark. I made up the name and I was just like, hey, want to do something on like one of those nights where you just sign up and play. And it just sort of happened. We just sort of got into the audience and started like climbing on chairs, and it was just, and then it would be like, we'd be in a scene, I'm like, I don't like this scene anymore, I'm bored, let's do something else. And it just organically started happening. And now it's definitely a staple of our show. And and the biggest journey for us has been, how do you do it well, and how do you do it in a way where you don't alienate the audience? We have done that several times. We've alienated some of the audiences, or at least parts of them, which I don't like. Kenny thinks is hilarious, but I don't like it because I'm a nice girl. But it's really just about making sure that the audience is in on the joke, that they are a part of what you're creating. And for me, it's also about noticing who in the audience is interested in playing with you and trying to discern that. You don't always get it right. And sometimes that makes for some awkward moments, but I would say more often than not, it's fun than not fun. And I think probably about 6-7 months ago, Kenny came up with the idea of basically kind of introducing us and letting them know that we're going to maybe jump out a little more often, that we might just stop playing in a scene and kind of, because we're bored, and move on to something else. So we now give them like a tiny little
heads up.
Heads up. And I personally feel really good about that, because now it's like, we're letting you know that this is gonna be a little quirky. So anyway.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're one of Bexar Stage's like favorite teams, because none of our people. Yeah, I mean,
That's so
blush, please blush.
lovely. No, I do.
Because
It's true.
stylistically,
It's very much true.
it's really different than a lot of the other stuff we do, and I think you guys do it really well. Huh? But I had to say it before Lex did, but but they love that, and so people always ask me like, Tina, when are Kenny Rogers coming back? because they look forward to that. So I think you're even getting, at least at Bear, like getting more audiences who are into that in particular. And so you're always one of the
we love coming, and we always feel so loved.
And David, our tech guy, is always so happy to play your shows because
love
you
him.
berate
and more
him,
and more sassy.
and he loves being berated by you, Heidi.
The weirdest thing in the world. It's like his kink. I don't know what's going on.
For those of you who haven't seen it, Kenny Rogers show here in San Antonio, we have an amazing tech guy named David, and Heidi and Kenny will they will rip him to shreds in the middle of a show. And there's
I think only one time it got uncomfortable, and then David laughed about it, and then everybody was like, "Oh, good, it's a joke."
When Kenny started fucking with his board.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you could see in his eyes. I did it too, and then I saw in his eyes the real, and it was like, "Let's go, gotta go,
gotta go."
Whoops! Don't fuck with
Cross the line.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lex, there's something that you do, and I don't know how much you were aware of it during your shows, because I've seen you perform so many times.
Expose.
The audience cannot get away with a sneeze, a cough, a moving of a chair, a zipper, the placing of a drink, because you will call the audience out on any single sound that they make, and you will put it into that scene that you're in.
I love that.
That specifically, so I'm very huge on involving the audience in some way, not necessarily as like Kenny Rogers might, but all the time. But for me, it's a live interact. I like when you're doing an art, there's probably a German word for this, but there is like taking what is special specifically about that art and trying to push that one element very hard. And to me, for improv, it's the audience, because you don't know what the hell you're doing. The audience doesn't know what the hell you're doing. And they know they're there. We know they're there. To ignore them, I feel just one is disingenuous.
I was going to say, I think you've described it also before as like selfish, where you're like,
yes,
is it for me or is it for the audience?
One of my things I hate the most is the get a suggestion and then sit down, shut up, and laugh kind of mentality that I've seen some people have, where it's like your job is over. We have our word, now up yours. Piss off.
Yep.
Our thing is more important. And I'm not trying to. I've seen very good shows like that. It's just not my personal mentality. And so being able to get even those things that you're talking about right there, those literal elements to things, because shit's gonna happen. People are gonna drop a bottle. Phone's gonna go off. And ignoring it, if you're ignoring it, the audience knows that you're ignoring it. They're trying to ignore it, but bringing it in, I think, heightens that element of improv, that live, everything's happening in this moment element. It's just fun. And it's something you can't plan. Like, there's no possible way for you to make a choice that, unless you're dialing your friend's phone mid show or something like that, for them to go off. And even then, but it's just, being able to there's gifts, they're wonderful gifts. And why would you ignore, even if, it sounds weird, an unplanned gift like that. And it's just so fun too, because now the audience is in on it. They love it. You love it. You almost never get a negative reaction from that. I'm sure Heidi would have a better thing from that. But
I agree with you. I've done that in shows before, like in non-Kenny Rogers shows. I'd say in Kenny Rogers shows, we usually are more aggressive. Like if somebody throws down a bottle or something, we like, what the fuck? Like we're like, how dare you? Like, whereas what you're talking about is more of a, like, you hear a bottle drop and be like, God, is that you?
Exactly.
Like, it's like, and I've done that too, but it's both things can be really fun. They're just kind of different ways
to incorporate it. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I feel like you have, for Heidi, Kenny, no, doesn't matter.
Kenny Rogers.
For Kenny Rogers, there's like the overarching thing, which is the Kenny Rogers show. And then there's the inner thing, which is like the scenes and stuff. And that can breathe in and out as itself. Yeah. And then there's like Kenny and Heidi, who are people outside of the whole element to integrate.
There's a whole map. He actually has it on the wall of his house.
I do. It's a lot of string.
Funny, because you just described it better than I ever have. So well done you.
And I don't usually do that, except in the Trading Eights, which was an improvised hip hop show we did. We did that a little more in that, because we involved the audience. That was one of our missions as a team, was to see how any given way we could integrate the audience somehow in our show. We opened by rapping about a member of the audience that we would find. We had all the suggestions written down. We pull them up constantly and rap to them or about them and stuff like that. So, but in a normal show, usually I'll integrate it into the scene more than I'll generally suggest we are a part of a show. Not that one's better than the other. It's just usually.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because we also, I mean, other ways to integrate the audience is like in a more intensive audience suggestion than just you know, can I have a word dildo? It is
Penis.
Audiences love dicks. That's what we learned.
Starting to sound
and
like
if you ask,
already-
oh god, if you get a drunk audience and you ask for a profession, it'll be stripper. Just here in fucking teeth.
Hey,
Or gynecologist.
Jason Boyson and I had a wonderful stripper show once, so which included the audience. I'll explain later.
But other ways where you can incorporate the audience would be things like taking a more intensive audience suggestion, asking somebody for a story, like getting somebody's like personal information and like being able to weave like a lot more than just one word into that story as the suggestion. We do a show on Thursdays at Bexar Stage called Key Party. And Key Party pulls an audience member up on stage, and the entire show is inspired by that audience member, but it's not like reenacting events from their life necessarily. It's, you know, incorporating what they do for a living and who they live with and what, you know, what things happened in their lives that we may ask questions about into the audience, and then also hopefully trying to get them incorporated into the scenes as well, because doing your first improv scene with our Key Party cast can be like a really fun way to try something that you've never tried. Like, you're in the audience to see a show, but like, why not just do the damn show? And so there's a lot of ways to incorporate the audience, whether that's, you know, talking to them personally, whether that's, you know, Heidi and Kenny talking to them very aggressively, but like in a very clear meta jokey sort of way. Hopefully. Or incorporating all those little noises, those cell phone going off, somebody getting up to go to the bathroom is now suddenly like in the scene with us because they stepped on the stage to leave the room. I've done all kinds of those things before, and it's really fun. I think it was Out of Bounds this past year in Austin. Lex, you were there, I think, with me when we saw there's the Out of Bounds shirt now. Where we saw a Jill Bernard show, her one-woman show.
I saw that, yes.
And at one point, she needed a zombie horde in her show, and it's a one-woman show. She can't be a zombie horde, so she walked into the audience and said, "You're zombies! You're zombies! You're all zombies!" And everybody put their arms up and like growled at her. And like, there's some great photos of those moments because she just said, "I need a zombie horde." We clearly can see she can't be one on her own. So we were all the zombie horde, and she just like told us to do that in the middle of a song, I think. And it was great. I mean, it's like, there's so many ways to involve the audience, but every one of those is memorable.
I think some of it boils down to, in improv, there truly is no fourth wall, just as a thing. I'm not suggesting one can't be built or erected. In fact, one of the things that I was thinking about before this was like, when is it not good to involve the audience, or are there those types for improv to do so? And I really think for improv in general, there isn't one. And acknowledging that is always going to be a bigger strength than attempting to erect one through whatever mentality you might have. I
think especially in Austin, there are some shows that are usually more dramatic, very thematic, like Tennessee Williams or a Shakespeare or something really like heavy. There are times where it definitely feels like there's a wall, like it's like a play, like straight up.
And I think there's total artistic value to that.
Totally. I just think in general with improv, like in most cases, it's better to acknowledge the lack of wall, to whatever extent that means to you.
It sounds to me like that's almost the first step, that before you can really do good audience integration, that you have to first realize that that wall isn't even there. And once you realize that wall isn't there, then you can go ahead and start doing that. And so Lex, you mentioned what I like about what you said about the coffee or the bottle, falling to the ground. When you do that and you incorporate the audience that way, you bring the audience into the scene. They become part of it. And I think that's that audience integration that Tina was talking about earlier, where you want them to know, like you mentioned too, that it is improvised and there's no way you could have planned that.
And 99.9% of improv we can't do without an audience. It's one of the struggles so many of us are having now with, Zoomprov and stuff like that.
Totally.
Is that we need, not just for our fragile egos that we all possess, but the also getting a suggestion at minimum, hearing their reaction. The thing about that fourth wall is that it exists whether you want it to or not. Even simple things like laughter will influence an improv scene, and that's letting that fourth wall break. Laughing in the scene is a way of breaking that fourth wall, of saying, I'm enjoying myself. The audience is going to fuel on that as well. And the more we lean into that skid, as opposed to trying to recorrect or avoid it, I think is just better improv personally.
The thing that, to branch off of that, I think one of the things to know is that the audience is its own organism. It's not, unless you have like the tiniest, like 4 people in the audience or something, like it really is like,
Been there.
and it's, we've all been there, right? And it's like, okay, these are definitely individual people. One person over here may laugh, nobody over here will, whatever. But most audiences are an organism. They have their own personalities. When they laugh, how much they laugh, if they're a quieter audience, if they're a louder audience. And I don't know what y'all's equivalent there is in San Antonio, maybe it's Key Party or something else, but in Austin, the Hideout Theater has a very, very long, like 10+ year running show called Maestro, which is a very game-based, short scene-based show. It's like an elimination style where you start off with all these improvisers and then the audience claps, votes until there's one and they're the maestro and yay, they win. And those audiences are usually pretty full and good. But some of them are warm, some of them are cold, some of them take a while to get into the voting. Some audiences only vote for 5s because they're afraid of hurting our feelings. Some audiences are like 1s and 2s and they're just like ready to destroy everyone. Usually it's somewhere in the middle of that. But when you're playing in that show and you're like, it's 10 o'clock on a Saturday, obviously there's no winner or loser on who's a better improviser. It's about the game. But there is this part of you that goes, man, I'd really like to make it to at least like the 3rd round just because like I'm up late on a Saturday. And so you're like, I'd like to do some more scenes. And so you can kind of feel the audience and that feeling of what they're going for and what they're not going for. And you can kind of tailor your improv a little bit to that. And that is something that I did a Maestro via Zoom, and it was, for me, really challenging. And I think that in general, people who are having to, during this quarantine, do improv on Zoom, they're having to, like Tina, we were talking about before the show started, you have to reinvent it, because without that organism, for me, that's my lifeblood. That is how my heart pumps for improv. And without it, it's not that I couldn't create something, but it isn't as fun to create something. And I don't get that pulse of that kind of lifeblood from the audience. And yeah, I mean, improv, audience is everything.
I agree with you completely. Yeah. I think there's a really good question on Twitch that I wanted to address, but just to piggyback on the end of that is like, that's why the show that we're doing right now on Fridays at 8 o'clock, total plug, Fridays at 8 o'clock is our new show, Tic Tac Toe, but it's super audience interactive. And I think that's one of my favorite parts is like, yes, the audience interacts on Twitch, which is totally different. But because I, as the host of that show, like am incorporating so many of their ideas, suggestions, points, comments, calling them by name really like makes them feel a part of the show, that like we had a ton of audience members for our debut show, which I was not expecting or anticipating, because, and they stayed. You know, looking at the metrics after the stream, I was like, oh shit, like the audience like stayed for the whole show, which I thought was really exciting because I thought it was a longer show and I was worried about the length of it. And they were like, no, it's interactive and we really need that. And they were really involved. And I think that was, for me, very validating to feel like, oh good, I did create a show that creates some of that same electricity between the audience and the performers. Like it gives them some of that feedback and like added to the show in ways that were not planned or structured, to add extra challenges or what have you. I do want to get to that point though.
Do it, because I'm wondering too. It's such a power move, right? Integrating the audience is a power move, but you have these two different contradicting forces. You may have an audience that, like you were saying, Heidi, you don't quite know the heartbeat of the audience yet. Are they going to be amenable to interaction? Do you have newbies, people that have never seen improv, that are just not going to like that? at the same time, are you playing possibly, I know this might not be the case for Kenny Rogers, but are you playing with newbie improvisers that quite don't yet know how to interact with the audience? So how do you balance these forces with newbie audience members and also possibly newbie teammates up on stage?
Who are you asking? Are you asking
Well, Heidi, I've seen you do some crazy stuff. I saw you, it might have even been the very last show that you did at Bexar Stage, where you grabbed a stool. You pretended that it was a roller luggage.
Yes.
You carried it up into the audience, step by step by step, making noise after noise. You went like through the aisle, like making people like move their legs and stuff, back and forth, back and forth. You were intentionally stirring and poking a hornet's nest with the audience, and we loved it. It was hilarious. How did you know that was going to work? How did you know you weren't going to get pushback from the audience?
I did not. No, that truth bomb. No, what I've realized, especially because I've done Bexar Stage enough times, and I've had good shows there. Mostly, I've had a couple of shows where I left going, I don't know how I felt about that. And it usually is because there was a section of the audience or a few people in the audience that were clearly not having a good time. Very rare.
Yeah,
but it has happened. That's the case here in Austin as well. There's been a couple of shows here and there where I'm like, I don't think this audience likes that. I think sometimes it is when it's new people. So getting that information in advance is always lovely when you do the whole clap hosting. Is there any new people there? I would say that in that particular case, what I've realized is I think audiences in general are kind of delighted and surprised when you're in their space, but as long as you're not calling them out directly. And I think that especially if they're sitting further back in the audience, usually people that are down to clown, that's not really the saying, but anyways, the people that are down usually in the front row are very close.
Or similar.
Or it's like the improvisers that are new improvisers are in the front because they want to be in on the action. And then the people who maybe are on a date and have never done this before are in the back. I don't necessarily ignore the people in the back, but I definitely have started feeling like I mainly focus on the people in the front. And if I do go into the audience, I try to do it where I'm not necessarily directly talking to one person. I may be talking to a group of people, or I do a move like that where it's like, I'm in your space. I mean, I don't think it's anything obviously I never want to do anything that would require consent. I'm not, it's nothing like that, but it's just I'm going to walk up and down the aisle and be obnoxious and interact with Kenny and that. And so it makes them a little what the fuck? But this is kind of fun, but what the fuck? And it's that's the energy we're looking for. And so I find that that's a safer move than maybe going to the fourth row and sitting down next to somebody and directly being tell me your deepest, darkest secret, person in the back.
Yeah. I think there's something about being approachable when you do it too. It's if you're having fun doing it, I think it's easier for them to get into. Again, I love messing with people who come in a big group, obviously a birthday party or bachelorette party, or groups of people who are clearly brought a case of drinks and are ready to have a good time. They're ready to interact, even if there is one or two of them in there that are nervous or I don't know what improv is going to do to me.
Becky, I don't know.
But in general, I find that unless it's full of students, the front row remains empty. There's a splash zone that people are afraid of in improv sometimes because they don't know if they're going to get messed with, if they're going to get brought up on stage. Obviously, the front row is the place where you worry about that stuff. And it's in general, we don't want you on stage if you don't want to be there.
No.
So I think there's a body language read that you do with the audience where you're if somebody's making eye contact and is giving you the excited eye, that you're oh, this guy is totally down. And sometimes you get the no, and sometimes you get the I don't know, and then it's that's somebody who wants to be asked or coerced. There's body language that you read about audience participants. And one of the things we do for Key Party is we ask people to write their names on a key, and that's very much a sign of I would like to participate in the show, or I'm at least open to it.
And still,
occasionally we pull a key, and they're I never thought you'd ask me.
Exactly. I was going to say 50% of them are still I didn't think I'd be picked. You put your name on it.
You you put your name on a key, get your ass up here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's the consent for me, is like reading some body language, reading
body language is very important.
is huge. And you have to like you got to take the time on it, because if you do sit in the back row with the guy who's sitting like this, like you're gonna encounter like some opposition, and that's not going to be helpful to your show. You want to do something that's like with somebody who's having fun, with somebody who's willing to shout a suggestion. It's just like working in a haunted house. Like you want to play with the people who have fun.
Yeah.
I say that as somebody who's spent so many years in haunted houses.
Well, I was just making how many times you bring that up in conversations.
You know what? People just need to know. People need to know. But I do think that there are so many people who come to their first improv show are like terrified of being asked to be involved. And it's like, we don't want you if you're not having, like, we want you to have fun. And if you're having fun does not include being on stage in any way, shape, or form, okay, cool. We don't want to bother you with that. We want you to have a good time. We don't want to ruin your night by embarrassing you. That's not going to help anybody.
Oh, go on.
A lot of it is the reading, but it's also, I just assume everyone there is there for the first time, just because it's an easy blanket to go with, and then you can read and play from there. Because a lot of people show up, ironically, from what I was mentioning earlier, the audience generally does have an expectation of a fourth wall. Especially because, I mean, 9 out of 10 shows you're going to see, if not more, has that. You know, most of them equate it to theater or something like that. I'm in the audience.
Yeah, like more traditional theater.
In the back. No one's going to mess with me. So being able to read or just get that experience of feeling that out from laughter or whatever reaction can benefit.
Totally. But I think there's so much fun you can have. One of the things that we talk about in a level 1 class or something would be like, the only things you have to use on a stage are like the 4 chairs we set out and like your scene partners. Like everything else has to be made up. But that's not the only thing that's in the room with you. The audience is in the room with you. Like those are the tools that you have at your disposal, are the chairs, your scene partners, and the people in the room with you. And they can...
The audience's tools. Tina Jackson, 2020.
The audience person, and
every improv audience is a tool.
Going after the shitty tech person. That's my goal. Is how do I make them cry?
I try to get at least.
David does. David cries.
Fight. Good.
I want somebody to call me out in the parking lot, because it's the only way I feel alive.
Oh,
it's the street fights. That's why we put tarps out there for you, so we don't have to clean up the blood.
A lot. I'm not a good fighter. You'd think I'd learned.
Yeah.
So I love the reminder that the audience is there with you. And I think that's something that a lot of us newbie improvisers don't quite realize yet.
Well, it's intimidating too.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, it can be.
It's a risk. It's a risk in improv to involve the audience, because that's a complete wild card unknown, right? Like you don't know what they're going to say when you ask them to participate in something. They could say something totally vulgar. They could say something totally great. They could say something like totally dark that would perhaps derail your show in some way.
For sure happened, yeah.
Yeah, and I've had all of those things happen to me in my experience, because I will take that risk. But it is a risk. It's a calculated risk. And I love, thank you. The audience is still saying dildo. The Twitch audience.
Penis! Can I get a penis?
Penis! Popcorn!
May I please have a fruit?
Get your vaginas.
It'll always be a
vaginas, everyone.
So like, yeah, it's a calculated risk to ask the audience to participate at all, because sometimes that's when you get hecklers where they're like, oh, we've been asked to participate, we will therefore participate when we are not asked.
Not stand up.
We are now vocally yelling at like not a television set, but like at people who are performing it. Like, and so sometimes it's very unwarranted what kind of feedback you get from the audience, and you just don't know. And I think it's hard as a young improviser to learn how to deal with that when it's happening live, and there is no script. There's no, like we can't tell somebody how to react to that specific circumstance, because that circumstance has not particularly arisen in a classroom setting or in a, it's like,
the truth is you got to
learn on the fly. You learn on the fly how to deal with an audience, really.
You have to do shows and then learn. That's it. I mean, there's no better answer, honestly.
Jumping back to the previous episode, I think one of the reasons it clicked in so quickly or more easily for me is coming up through short form.
Mhm.
Doing a lot of short form early on, one of the things baked into it that I think is a positive is a tendency towards audience interaction right out the gate, consistent, persistent audience interaction.
Right, because you're asking for more suggestions, you're asking for it more frequently, so they feel more frequently involved rather than a 20-minute grounded short form show which just says give me the suggestion and now shh, we're going to make art. And both kinds of shows are fine, but we're talking about a specific style that really keeps the audience involved and invested. I think audience involvement, aside from the people who would never want to participate no matter what, which I do think in improv happens, but like isn't, I think Lex is more right where if you're coming to an improv show, you expect a certain amount of involvement. So in general, I think audience involvement gets them really invested in the show. It gets them excited because they're seeing their story play out, their suggestion play out, something that this guy behind him was laughing about. Like, I'm more invested. I sit more, and I think the more investment you get, the more laughs you get, the more reactions. Even if you're not looking for laughs, you're looking for reactions from the audience, emotional reactions. And
one thing
I think
for newer improvisers, though, is really important. Like, if you get a suggestion, use it. And even
sure.
the most experienced improvisers occasionally will do a show and they're like, crap, did we forget to use the suggestion? Like,
Sure.
we suck, but like, for the love of God, like if you ask the audience for something, they're expecting a payoff and they probably won't relax until they get a little bit of it. And they might walk away going, improv sucks because they're full of shit.
Yeah.
So-
They just did whatever they wanted. And I've heard that too.
Mhm.
They just did whatever they wanted. They didn't listen to us or whatever. And that's kind of what me as an artistic director, that's what I want to avoid. I want to avoid the situations where an audience ever leaves unhappy. I want the audience to enjoy what they're doing. And I think watching, and I think one of the ways to do that is to utilize the suggestion and utilize the audience as often as the show is appropriate in the show. And different shows have different vibes.
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely recommend, particularly if you're creating a form or using a form, to find a way to more often either integrate or utilize them better. Using the audience doesn't mean having to every time go into the audience or pull one up. I've seen that before. Like you're saying with Jill or any of those kind of scenarios, it can just be more interaction or more engagement through your form, through your scenario, or whatever you're doing, to make sure to continually kind of recheck in with the audience and say, remember you're here. We remember you're here. Remember you're here because we might need you for whatever reason. Like saw a D&D themed show where the cleric's god was a member of the audience. And
we do that with Die the Beholder.
What to do next. I've seen longer form shows just have blind lines for whatever reason, just having them stick them to a wall and use them whenever they want. Any of those kind of small touch points to integrate into your shows can do it. Doesn't have to be the focus necessarily.
Yeah.
Guys, we're out of time, but I can tell that, integrating the audience, involving the audience into your scenes, that's a power move, guys. And I feel like you got to be someone like y'all to really be able to do that well. And I think
that's where you're wrong, Rick. I think I can do it. I think you just learn how to do it.
You learn how to do it. And like Heidi said, just taking that suggestion, that very first thing that every, level 1 improvising group does, just taking that suggestion and putting that into your scene work is one really nice payoff for the audience. Guys, thank you again for joining us on this show. Lex Simpson, thank you. Appreciate it. Love the beard.
Thank you.
Heidi Rogers, thank you so much for joining us from Austin. I really appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And Tina Jackson, my number one. You're my number one. Yeah.
You had to dig.
Heidi caught it.
Yeah.
Heidi caught it. What was your hesitation, Rick?
So good.
I was trying to figure. I wanted to incorporate
thank you,
dildo. I wanted to incorporate dildo in my final statement, and I couldn't figure out. Yeah.
Rick.
Dildo. There.
Dildo.
Folks, everybody on Twitch, thank you for joining us live.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed this crazy show. We have another show coming up on Friday, same time, same channel. Friday's show is going to be about show creation, and we're gonna have a few producers on the show for us. So that'll be super
We've got
interesting.
Clint and Roy Janik from Austin.
If you want to know more about creating your own improv show, tune in to us on Friday. Guys, things are crazy right now. Things are crazy all around the world. Things are crazy for small businesses. Things are crazy for theaters, small theaters, improv theaters around the country. If this sounded or seemed interesting to you at all and you want to learn more about it, do some research. Do some research into the theaters that are in your area. If they're open, go visit them. If they're offering online stuff, check out to see what they have. Bear Stage is going to have more and more online stuff coming very, very soon. And if you found this interesting, and if you're in the San Antonio area, go to bearstage.com. There's a donate button right on that front page. Folks, that's the last of our show. Do we need to plug another upcoming show, Tina? Friday's Tic-Tac-Toe?
What are we doing on Sunday, Rick?
Oh, great, guys. On Sunday at 7 o'clock on this channel, we're going to have what you guys have been asking for a long time. We're going to take Yes and Ask Me. We're going to do a revisit with an old show with former panel members, and we're going to extend that shit for like an hour and a half. So
it's going to be a long talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Someone like Lex is going to just go to town on that shit. So again, if you found this interesting and you just want more of it, this Sunday at 7 o'clock, there'll be plenty of it for you. Folks, thank you all again for joining. I hope everybody has a wonderful night.
Hey.
Hi, all. Thanks for joining
Bye.
us.
Bye, guys.